The Financial Survival Network, helping you survive and thrive in the new economy. Go to carrylutz.com and sign up for 30 free micro trainings on financial survival.
$14.90 WGCH. This is Kerry Lutz. You're listening to the Financial Survival Network, and we've got another roundtable, but this one is a roundtable with a twist. It's the Anarchist roundtable. If you're really fed up with government, if you don't want to look another bureaucrat in the eye and get grilled and have your life made miserable, well, these guys have an alternate vision. I've got Gary Gibson from Whiskey and Gunpowder. Gary, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Hey, it's great to have you here. And I've got Jeff Berwick of dollarvigilante.com. Jeff, good to hear you again.
Always good to be on with you, Kerry.
We're talking anarchism, and most people really don't know what anarchy is, only what they've been told it is in the schools. First, Jeff, could you just give us a brief explanation, a brief definition of how anarchy works or doesn't work?
Sure. Anarchy is very simple. It's basically just based on the non-aggression principle. And basically, it's a belief that you can live in a society without having a coercive or violent ruler, which is what we have today with every government on earth is a violent or coercive ruler. They use violence. They have a monopoly on violence. And we believe that we're getting to the point now as a human race that we can actually live without violence or coercion. And that's basically all anarchy is.
Okay, that's pretty easy. Gary, you more or less concur with that definition? You have anything to add?
To add to that, you can't force me to do anything, and that extends beyond the private dealings that we do every day. That means the government as well. Like they're just people in the end, and there's nothing special about them, and they can't use violence or coercion either. And whatever world we end up with after that, that's what we're talking about. That's anarchy, without a ruler.
Yeah, so basically every government rules at the barrel of a gun. But it seems like in society, in life, government is as natural as a high school kid with acne. Every Indian tribe in existence has a chief, a medicine man, a council of elders. How can you believe, Jeff, that anarchy is really a natural state of affairs? It's the natural state and that people won't be chopping each other's heads off.
Well, first of all, it's important to realize we've all basically been brainwashed by government for the last century. They have us for 12 years of indoctrination camps in the schools, and then when we go home, they have the propaganda on the media. So they make it seem like there never existed anything besides government. But just the fact that government can't exist without taxing society is proof that society existed first. But basically, I do agree, though, that in the past, we probably weren't ready as a human race for anarchy. There's a certain level of knowledge necessary, a certain level of experience necessary to realize we've gone through this nation-state experiment now, and it's proving that it's not working. We can talk more about that later, but it's all falling apart now. And you said that back in the old days we had a council of elders and that sort of thing. I have no problem with that as long as it's all voluntary. So as long as I have the right to not be in the tribe, or as long as I agree that I want a council of elders or a medicine man or a chief or whatever, that's completely fine. All anarchists are voluntarists. We just believe in non-coercion and non-violence, despite what everyone thinks anarchy is. We can talk about that later as well. But really, this philosophy of anarchism or anarcho-capitalism is actually quite new, which is quite strange to me, actually. I thought it would be like a very old philosophy, but it really isn't, and it's really been built on just over the last few decades, really, by a number of people, including people like Lew Rockwell and Walter Block and Hans Hermann Hoppe and all sorts of amazing people who have been building a body of evidence and a body of philosophy which shows that this is a natural state of affairs, and it is the best possible way for humans to live in cooperation together.
Gary, what do you think? Do we need some government? Don't you think there's a basic threshold need where in order not to dissolve into chaos, you got to have some authority body with hopefully the consent of the people who are being governed by it? Do you really think you could just have nothing and everybody would just get along?
Yes, I mean, I always start when people ask me that, like, why would I not kill you if somebody wouldn't punish me for it? Like, why do you want to do that now? Do you want to take, rape, or kill now? This is predicated on the assumption that people aren't all psychopaths. Yes, there are some of us who are, but when you have a government, those people have a place to go and exert their will over you and do it with legitimization, not just like the common criminal would. So no, I don't. I think we don't need any authority figure to tell us how to deal with each other. There are so many things that naturally reinforce themselves in our private dealings. We see it in our private lives. The things we ostracize each other when we misbehave. We don't give each other business if we're not acting fairly. There's so many things that we do that naturally inhibit our behaviors, and you don't need an outside force for that. And when you create that outside force, you create something that eventually will. I mean, I think eventually will destroy your freedom entirely. I think the experiment with the U.S. government is the perfect example. I'm seeing so many reports like how there's a myth of freedom that used to exist here. It's gotten so far away from the freest nation, the best start ever, the smallest government, and look where it eventually grows. So I like that. I think and I'm quoting Rothbard here, I think people believe that the government can stay minimal are the fanciful idealists, that the government can just stay in its little box and do things that we think the government should do, because things keep getting tacked onto that and it keeps getting more authority to grow, and it's where we end up right back with the pharaoh and the slave state where we are now. I mean, half my income as a U.S. person is being taken away. It's gone right back to that where so when you say governments are natural and that we need something, I'm saying governments are as natural, not so much as the kid with acne, but as slavery is natural. That seems to be a condition human beings like a lot. Doesn't mean it's right. So I'm arguing from a moral position that it's just wrong to tell people, to force them to do something that they don't want. And there's no way you can avoid that when you have a government. So I'd rather the situation where there's no coercion. And I think, that can work. That's more natural than the slavery or pseudo-slavery that governments always lead to.
Let's take it the next step, Jeff. You're a single mother of two, getting all sorts of checks from Uncle Sam, and you think this is a natural state of affairs, that this is the way it's supposed to be, that you have a right to live at the expense of others. And then all of a sudden the system is ended. We go in, we have anarchy. What happens then to people like that who have this dependency on the nanny state, on the Leviathan state? What's the transition? I'm just not seeing it, I guess.
Well, they're going to have that transition whether they want it or not, so they better get used to it. The U.S. government is in a complete all-out state of collapse right now. The U.S. dollar won't exist 5 years from now. The euro probably won't exist a year or two from now. We're going to be seeing the end. We're reaching the end of this road. This started in 1913, really, with the start of the Federal Reserve, and then it got worse in 1933 when they took the gold, basically stole the gold from the American people and took the basic gold backing away from the dollar. And then in 1971, they completely unhinged gold from the dollar, and we've been in a fiat currency world ever since. So it's only been actually a little over 40 years now since we've been in this system, and it's in complete collapse. All Western governments are bankrupt, and this is going to collapse whether you like it or not. So she better get used to it. I have some good news for her, though. Her life's going to be much better as soon as she learns how to be productive again. There's nothing healthy about living on government welfare. All that does is destroy people. I'm so glad and so lucky that I wasn't on some sort of welfare when I was younger, or today I wouldn't be who I am today. I wouldn't have had to learn how to become a productive person, and I wouldn't become the successful person I've become today, who lives all around the world and does whatever I want. So, but in the meantime, the transition is going to be hard for sure, and that's actually why I've left the Western world. I'm actually originally from Canada, and now I live in Mexico, and I have a hideout in Argentina, and I'm just preparing for this system to collapse. So many people, especially in the U.S. now, are on mind-altering drugs now because they're so depressed, because they're living in this horrible system of non-freedom. It's basically slavery they're even going to have to get off those pills too, because they won't be able to afford those pills. So it's going to be a really scary time. But the good news is if they can get through it, if she can get through it, we'll be off to a better world. We just have to get through this transition from the horribleness of statism to the peaceful and prosperityness of anarchy.
So, Gary, you concur with that? Do you think that somebody who's totally dependent upon the government, and this is all over the world, the U.S. is just one example of it, but every Western democracy has got this parasitic, I don't want to pass judgment on them, but a dependent class. You think cold turkey is the way to go with them?
Cold turkey, I don't know. I think it's something that's being forced on us, whether, like Jeff said, we're going to, it's no longer affordable. It's never been affordable long term, and we're coming to see the end of this gravy train. Here's the thing, like, there are always going to be winners and losers when there's changes like that. You know, we see all the time, people who are benefiting from the way things are now, no doubt, and they're not going to anymore when the change comes. So I want to point out that she's benefiting from it, but all society, you know, the producers aren't. They're being taken from to feed her. And, well, they can afford it. And that argument doesn't really fly. You know, some of us in the middle class who don't get the tax, and I'm not judging, by the way, anybody who finds ways to hide their wealth from the government. I'm go for it, especially if it's legal. You know, so, you know, these politicians get accused of, like, he's not paying his fair share. I'm like, he should be paying nothing. None of us should. So obviously those who, there are two people who are, you know, kinds of people that would argue that they need to pay more is the people who are benefiting from, like the mother with two kids who made a bad decision and went to this, you know, this uneconomical choice of having children without support, and then the people who are the other slaves who are beaten down just as bad, they want people to join them. Like, I don't want to get raped alone. So I've been clamoring to keep the system going the way it is, and it's not moral. I mean, charity itself, people say, what about charity? Like, I don't want to say private charity alone will help that. It will, because the people willing to pay their taxes now because they think it's doing some good. They're not going to go away. They're still going to, and their money will go further in a system where they were not being stolen from, where they had to be responsible for it, and charity by itself, like unfettered like that, does create dependence. So everybody will be better off. In the meantime, I just point out that, yeah, there will be winners and losers in any change. I mean, if my business model gets undermined by somebody who's doing it better, I have to find something else to do. That's the way the world works. And so there's no, you know, I'm sorry, but yeah, the change is going to come. And cold turkey, I don't know about that. I'm scared of what that would look like, because I'm still in the U.S. I'm like Jeff, I haven't escaped. And I live, no matter where I go, I live near a dependent class of people. You know, I see them in the mass transit, whatever city I'm in. And, you know, you go out to the country maybe and hide from them. That's something we actually kind of recommend if you can. If you don't want to leave the country, get out to the country and not be around when, because I don't know what's going to drop. And there are a lot of dependent people who have no way of surviving outside of getting violent when that handout stops.
And you know, New York City, the second that computer shuts down and the EBT cards are no longer getting filled, there are going to be consequences to it. Because
yeah, I mean, that's so real. I mean, I think people who say that try to sign, you know, we sign up with scaremongering, like, oh, the minority is going to rise up. But minority or not, you've created this, and not just people who are a little dependent, you've created a culture that's generations deep in this. And they know, and they are not even part of mainstream anymore. They don't have any connection with the people that they see, you know, handing them food. They just feel entitled, and they have no way to support themselves. And they have guns. So yeah, I want to be around that one. And Jeff's probably, it's going to stop. It's and I don't know how cold turkey it's going to be, but probably on the more abrupt side.
Yeah, well, it's definitely unsustainable. It's the result of all collectivist socialistic endeavors. What we're seeing now, the ultimate collapse. There is no way to avoid it. The Pilgrims figured this out 400 years ago, and every society that's tried it, it fails, but yet somehow we think we're different. But my fear is that you've got this disenfranchised class that is totally dependent. Somebody's going to come along. I'm fearful that totalitarianism arises from that. How do we stop that from happening, Gary?
Well, just point out that it's not something that you can't just have a dependent person and say, okay, you're free. Because, like, no, I wasn't free. I was benefiting from the looting system that we had before. I needed that. So no, they're not ready. And I'm afraid to say it's unnatural, the state of anarchy. That's what it sounds like. But you do have to have some thought behind it. You have to have people who are capable of taking care of themselves. And when you have broken people, it's like cutting off somebody's legs and then, you know, like, all right, now good luck climbing that mountain. I mean, we've crippled the human race with the indoctrination camps that public schools. The government is not going to fund a school and then tell the students the ills of government. They're going to make sure everybody understands how necessary they are. So you have these people who are dependent, who their whole lives have grown up. They in a system that tells them that the system is necessary. The Matrix doesn't say, like, the Matrix is evil. The Matrix tells you the Matrix is good, and it needs, you need it. And the people who are dependent on it, like, these are the people we have left, and they can't just become anarchists. That will end up pretty badly. So, yeah, I don't know how it's going to work. there needs to be a lot of education. That's what the internet's all about. The internet's making it more possible. People don't, see through the veil and kind of get it. But I'm not too hopeful about sudden collapse producing a bunch of people going, at last we're free. Now we can build and use our skills and stop being stolen from. Like, no, most people, they don't know how to work outside of protected industries. They don't know how to make a buck. They don't know how to do anything. And their mindset is one that they need a parent to some degree, And no, you have guys like Buffett. Even the rich people are like, no, we need the state, and we need to pay more and to keep it going. But the idea, it starts with the ideas, and that's made possible by the internet. I wouldn't know about this stuff without the internet. The people I'm contacting, and it seems to be growing. This sentiment that there's another way, that the government always ends up becoming a mass looter and taker of rights and not a protector. I think that's getting out there, and there's resistance to it. The media is being called there to put people with these kind of thoughts into a very bad light. Have you guys seen this? The FBI warning people about the sovereign citizen movement and how these people who think that there should be a gold standard, how they're dangerous and they can turn violent against police at the drop of a hat is the term they're using. They're kind of sicking the dogs on us, and because I think the sentiment is growing, but it has to be knowledge first, and some philosophy behind this before this just goes away, and there's going to be a lot of people who really needed it, and they're not ready for it yet. So yeah, it's not something that can just happen right now. I think there's a lot more information to be spread first.
I heard that thing. I saw the report from the FBI, and I felt like they were talking about me. I'm not the guy on Cops who they try to pull me over and I decide to get into a 130-mile-an-hour car chase with him. I pull over and hand the guy my license and registration and just want him to get out of my life as quickly as possible so I can go on my merry way. And yet now I'm an enemy and you guys are enemies, and we're just minding our own damn business, going about our lives. We have our beliefs and supposedly we're free. But obviously, this is yet another instance of creeping totalitarianism, and now it seems it's not creeping anymore. It's starting to gallop. And the final question is, gold and silver, using them to transition through the coming, and I don't want to say coming economic collapse. We're in the middle of the economic collapse, right? You guys agree on that? We're in the middle of the collapse, correct?
Totally. Yeah, the early middle. A lot more middle to go.
Yeah, I'm about to do a thing about that Clint Eastwood commercial because he said we're in halftime. They just fired the 2-minute warning, and we're all standing around the sidelines looking at each other, wondering what the hell to do. But for another episode. So gold and silver, protecting yourself in the coming anarchy, or the coming transition to anarchy, and during this economic collapse. What's your thoughts, Jeff?
Well, I don't know if we're headed towards anarchy. I hope we are. Remember, anarchy isn't chaos. That's what the government always wants us to think. They've been spending about 100 years trying to change the word anarchy to try to make it sound like it's some sort of chaotic, violent thing, but it's actually peacefulness and principled way of living. But yes, what we're headed for sure, without a doubt, and that's what I write about at the Dollar Vigilante, is the coming collapse of the Western monetary system, the U.S. dollar-based global reserve system. This system, I'm surprised it's lasted this long. If you look at the numbers, the total amount of U.S. government debt and liabilities, if it was actually accounted for properly, is $75 trillion. That works out to $250,000 per person, or for a family of four, $1 million of federal government debt and liabilities overhanging it. This all will be collapsing. And even the Obama administration has said privately that their goal is to actually kill the dollar. And that actually is what most politicians say when they all want to devalue their dollar. They think in some weird Keynesian economic fantasy land that somehow making your money worth less is good. You know, everything in government is backwards. So anyway, what we're going to end up with is all these fiat currencies are going to reach their intrinsic value sometime soon. And one of the best ways to protect yourself is to own precious metals. Gold and silver are They're excellent ways. They've been used for thousands of years to protect yourself from government collapse and government tyranny. And really, one of the things that I say in my newsletter is to get some of this precious metals outside of your own country is very important, because as these governments collapse, they're liable to do anything. They might try to take your assets. They've done that before in the U.S. In 1933, they confiscated all gold. I don't know if they'll do that again, but they may tax it at some egregious rate or something like that. So there's many ways, thanks to the internet, to get your gold all over the world. And we're actually writing a special report on this, which is coming out in the next couple of weeks, on how to internationalize your gold. And I think that's a very important thing for people to be doing.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that report too, Jeff. You mentioned it to me, and we'll get contact info after. So, Gary, gold and silver, I know you're a big advocate, and just tell us, when you can't get out of the U.S., how gold and silver could potentially protect you and your family.
It's funny, gold and silver came up again in the New York Times or something like that. I get these papers confused. But somebody they asked was like, why don't you just use a bottle of 1982, champagne or something like that? Dismissed it. And obviously, this person either doesn't understand money at all, or they're paying him to be this flip, because when it comes down, when the dollar collapses, like, people understand why for thousands of years gold and silver have worked as money. They fit all the definitions of it better than anything else. And that's why they keep being used. And 100 years of brainwashing is, coming undone with the reality situation is to search yourself on top of us. And when it's like, oh yeah, they are money. And so they'll help you with personal trade here in the U.S. Like Jeff points out again, he recommends that you don't have it all here, because they could easily say, well, hand it in, and good luck with what you have left. And then there's I don't know what you use then. Actually, I do. I recommend, we have a report from Whiskey and Gunpowder about the U.S. nickel, which is my favorite way to just, instead of getting gold and silver, and I like silver even better. If you told me, I got into silver a few years ago thinking it would multiply in price, and I can't believe that it has so quickly, and I expect it's going to a lot more. It's going to be a lot more valuable, more so than, not more valuable than gold per unit, but it's going to multiply in value more quickly than gold possibly. But the very simple way to hedge against everything is just saving in nickels, because right now the nickel, it's actually copper and nickel mixed, copper nickel, 75% copper, 25% nickel, and the value right now is a little bit more than a nickel. It's a little bit more than face value. So right now you can go to a bank and you get $100 worth of nickels. You actually have like $110, $115 worth of metal, and that is going to assert, that value will assert itself for trade should the actual dollar collapse, the metal content of that. So the government right now is funding you. It's subsidizing your acquisition of something that will hold its value. You can get it below its actual cost, courtesy of the U.S. government. And that's, if you have to have something here, it's legal tender still. And it's probably going to be taken out of circulation at some point. So you might want to get on that. If you're going to be here in the U.S. and you want something that's going to hold its value, that they probably won't confiscate, that's the way to go, I think. And I would also recommend that you go ahead and getting gold and silver, more silver, I think is a better idea than gold.
Right. It's funny that you mentioned the nickels, because there was a story about Kyle Bass, who's a hedge fund guy in Texas. He wanted $1 million worth of nickels, and he goes to his local bank, and they say, well, $1 million? And he says, yeah, I want $1 million worth. So they have to order it from the Federal Reserve or the Treasury, and he gets a call from the government, and they say, well, why do you want $1 million worth of nickels? Which, for those people who've attended government indoctrination schools, that's 20 million nickels, right? 20 nickels to the dollar. And the guy from the Fed calls him, why do you want it? He says, I like nickels. And eventually they couldn't think of any reason not to give it to him. So now he's got a warehouse full of nickels. I mean, it must take up like, it must be the size of the Manhattan Public Library, like a square block in some bonded storage warehouse. But what you're saying is 100% true. A few months ago, a nickel was worth 6.3 cents or 6.8 cents. I think it got that high when copper went up, because nickels are mostly made up of copper with a little bit of nickel thrown in. So it's really like the wrong name for it anyway. But be that as it may, it was worth 6.8 cents per nickel.
I think you got to 7.5. I think you got up to 7.5 at one point.
Oh,
yeah, last year. Yeah, and that's when I was really pushing this. Like, I don't know if that's going to mean that it's going to force the government to stop making them and make them out of zinc or steel or whatever from now on. And stop making because that doesn't make any sense. Like, why? That's the same thing happened with the silver coins, and people say that sounds nuts, this nickel idea. But the same thing happened with the silver coins, the dime and the quarter and the half dollar. You can now trade for like 25 times face value. They trade you can go anywhere online, go to a coin store, and they'll give you 25 times what that coin says it's worth. The same thing is happening to the nickel right before our eyes. It'll probably eventually happen to the dime and the quarter, which are now mostly zinc or something. And right now it's a chance for you to get this before it takes off the same path that the dime and the quarter already did, 40 years ago, 50 years ago almost. So it's already flirted that high, and I imagine when it gets to be 10 cents worth of metal in that nickel, they're going to stop giving them out.
Yeah, they will. It's Gresham's law, and the bad money will force out the good money. And I remember in 1965, my brother came home, and he had 2 hands full of coins. One were pre-65 silver quarters, and the other were 1965, as David Morgan calls them, Johnson slugs. And he dropped the 65s on the floor, and they had this tinny, really insubstantial sound. And he dropped the silver on the floor, and they sounded like money. And I didn't realize then that was going to shape my life. 47 years later, God, I'm 54. But here we are talking about this now, because my brother dropped those quarters on the floor in 1965. So on that note, Gary, just tell us where we find you on the internet, how we sign up for your service.
If you would, go to whiskey and gunpowder, just like it sounds, .com. You can sign up there, and I hope your listeners do. And then you can get the newsletter after that. We'll be talking about nickel some more. There's a nickel report that we offer. So, just go to the website, sign up, and you'll be on your way.
Yeah, and I love the site. I get your newsletter every day, and I read it religiously. Jeff, dollarvigilante.com, spell it out for those public-schooled folks out there. I always got to get you on that,
Sure, I understand. I know I went to public school for a few years myself, so it's just Dollar Vigilante, which is VIGILANTE.com, and we have a free blog just right on our front page. Just put your email in there, and you'll see all the kinds of stuff we talk about, and you'll hear about this upcoming gold report we're doing and all that sort of stuff. And if you enjoy the newsletter, we do have a paid newsletter, and you can sign up for that after that if you'd like.
All right, excellent, guys. Maybe we'll make a plan so when you release that report, we'll all read it, and then we'll get back and do a roundtable on that report. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Sounds good to me.
All right. Hey, both of you be well, and we'll talk to you soon.
Hope so. Take care.
You too. Take care.